Okay. My name is James from Varsity Unlimited Tutors. We are an academic consultancy company that specializes in assisting students with their work, their university work. So we do tutoring, we do one-on-one assignment coaching, and etc. So if you ever in need of help for all the different modules that you have, you can just contact me on our various numbers as they are provided here, or you can just check on our YouTube channel or any one of our websites, social media platforms. You can get our numbers from there so that you can just contact us for a quote in terms of our services. So for this lecture, this is for economics 1A that we are offering this for today. It's a free lecture, but for those of you that want the extra help in economics, we will start some official lectures in the first week of September, and the classes for economics are usually 650 Rand for the whole semester, which means from the beginning to the end of the semester, we'll be doing lectures where we teach you how to do your assignments, where we teach you how to prepare for the exams, and we go through the content and etc. So that will be for 650 Rand if you're interested. But for today, it's for free. You can just stay on and listen through. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce you to the subject of economics. So for some of you, you've never studied economics before, and today it is your first test at what economics is all about. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what you are going to be studying under economics and the key concepts that you need to know for you to have an understanding of the economic terms, of the graphs, or of the calculations that you may need to do as you go through the what? As you go through the semester. Okay. So economics, broadly speaking, is what we call the study of trade-offs. So what do we mean by that? What is a study of trade-offs? So we are saying that in an economy such as the one that we have in South Africa, right? There are what we call resources, right? And there are what we call wants or needs or people. For instance, there are resources and then there are people that have wants and needs. Now, the resources that exist in an economy are limited in nature, whereas the needs or wants of individuals are not limited. They are unlimited, right? So what do I mean by that? When we are in economics and we are talking about resources, right? We are talking about 4 key principles. Land is a resource in economics. Labor is a resource in economics. Capital is a resource in economics. And entrepreneurial skills is a resource in economics. I will define further about those resources in a couple of slides, but I just wanted you to know what we mean when we're talking about resources. So that is what we are saying is limited. We're saying labor is limited in number by the people that are in the country. Land is limited in number by the space that we have. Capital is limited in number by the machinery that is available. Entrepreneurial ability is limited in number by the intellect of the entrepreneurs that are in an economy. But us as people, our wants and our needs are not limited. They are unlimited. I, for example, I would like to drive an Audi. I would like to drive a Benz. I would like to drive a BMW. In addition to driving those cars, I would want a house in Sandton. I would want a house in Durban by the sea. In addition to that, I would want a lot of different things. Therefore, the resources that are available will never match the needs and wants that we have as people. Now, because there is a mismatch between resources and the needs and wants that we have as individuals, we have to make a choice, right? We have to make a choice in terms of how are we going to make use of the resources to satisfy the needs that we have. Which of the unlimited wants are we going to satisfy? Should I take the house in Durban or should I take the house in Cape Town? Should I buy a Volvo or should I buy a Benz? Now, those are the choices that I'm making. Why am I making the choices? Because they are limited amount of resources. So economics is the study of the choices that I'm making, is the study of the trade-off that happens when I make the choices. It is the study of my behavior, the human behavior, that happens because of the relationship that exists between scarce resources and unlimited what? Unlimited ones. So from talking about these things, we can now see that we're now introducing terms like scarcity, terms like choice, and there's an also term we introduce like opportunity cost. So those are what we call the various economic principles that we'll discuss about. So I've given you now a definition of what economics is all about. So that's what you're going to be studying for the whole semester. That's what economics is all about. Now that we've defined what economics is all about, there are branches of economics, there are different branches of economics that we can talk about. For example, there is what we call macroeconomics and what we call microeconomics. So what you guys are studying in our economics 1A is what we call micro with an I, microeconomics. Microeconomics, we say it is the study of the actions of particular people or particular economic agents. It is the study of individuals, the study of households, of workers, of businesses. We are looking at one particular entity and we are studying how does that particular entity, how does that individual, how does that household, how does that business make the decisions that it makes, right? Then macroeconomics, on the other hand, you're going to study it in the second semester. It's called economics 1B. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, is the study of the whole, is the study of broader issues that affect everyone, but not only one person. Issues like the prices of everything, i.e. inflation. Issues like unemployment in the country, the lack of jobs in the country. Issues like the balance of payments, the imports and exports, the exchange rate of the specific country. Issues like GDP and economic growth. Those are broader economic issues that are studied under macroeconomics, which are going to do in the second semester. So that's a distinction between two branches of economics. Then another distinction between two branches of economics is what we call positive economics and what we call normative economics. Positive economics is the study of facts, cause and effect. If I increase the price right now, what is going to happen to the quantity demanded, right? If I increase production in a company by one extra unit, what is going to be the new cost that we are going to face as a company? So these are established scientific facts that are in economics. So that's positive economics. Then there is what we call normative economics. Normative economics, these are value judgments, these are recommendations. We are asking ourselves questions like, should we increase the tax rate or not? Should we charge the people that earn more money a higher tax or not? Should we distribute the income to the poor people? Should we have unemployment benefits in the country or not? These are value judgments that we are making, recommendations, what ought to be, right? That we are trying to talk about. So that's normative economics. So those are the different branches of economics. On one end, macro versus microeconomics. Then on one end, positive versus normative economics. Okay. So now I'm done with the definitions of economics, right? Now we want to go into the actual study. We've now started studying economics, right? So when we start studying economics, the first thing that we study is the definition of economics. Remember, we said we introduced key concepts. Within our definition, we talked about limited resources. Within our definition, we talked about scarcity. Within our definition, we talked about this opportunity cost. I didn't put it in the definition, I don't want to confuse you, but there's also opportunity cost within our definition. So the first concept now, resources, limited resources, right? When we say that there are limited resources, what are the resources of economics, right? So I've already told you that there's land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurial skills. Those are the key resources of economics. But what are they? When we say land, do we talk about the soil only? No, when you are in economics, land represents anything that is naturally occurring, including the actual land, including the trees that exist in the ground, the livestock, the kudus, the impalas, the cattle that exist in the various farms, the wind, the sun, the water, all of that is part of what we call land. And land is considered what we call a primary factor of production. Then another, we talked about labor. Labor consists of two things. There's what we call physical labor, and there's what we call intellectual labor. Physical labor, we're talking about the guys that are lifting up things, the guys that are using their muscles at the workplace. That's physical labor. Intellectual labor, we're talking about, those guys that are using their minds, maybe the engineers and etc. that are sitting down making plans, the managers and etc. They are providing intellectual labor. All of that is part of the what? Part of the resources. Labor is also part of the primary resources. So land and labor are part of the primary resources. These are naturally occurring resources. Now, the second part, we talked about capital and entrepreneurial ability. Capital represents, it's not money, capital is not money, but it represents anything that we manufacture within a country for the specific purpose of creating other goods and services. So this is like maybe an intermediary good, right? So we're saying that a tractor is an example of capital, right? A plant and machinery in a company is an example of what? Of capital. So that is what we refer to as capital in what? In economics. The various tools and machinery that we're going to use in our production purposes, not the money, but the actual tools and machinery that we are going to use. So financial capital is not capital in economics. We don't talk about it. We talk about actual physical capital. Then lastly, entrepreneurial ability. Entrepreneurial ability, we are saying that once you have the land, the labor, and the capital, someone has to come up and take the risk of doing business so as to produce a good or a service. And that person, we call them an entrepreneur. And that entrepreneur is actually a resource when we are talking in economics. An entrepreneur is a resource. So if you look at these factors of production, at a later stage, we're going to go deeper, right? If you look at these factors of production, each of them actually is going to get a reward. If you own land, you get rentals for the land that you own. If you own capital, you get interest for the capital that you own. If you own labor, you get wages for the labor that you own. If you are an entrepreneur, you get profit for the entrepreneurial skills that you get. But for now, that's not important. We discuss about it in a different topic. Right. So that's the first concept, right? The resources that are limited that we have as a country. Then we say that the resources are limited. They are what? Another way of saying resources are limited is by using the word scarcity. Scarcity, we are basically saying that the resources will never be enough to satisfy the needs and wants that we have as what? As individuals. Now, because of the limited resources, because of scarcity, because of the unlimited nature of the wants, we have to make choices, right? So if I have a farm in terms of land, I have a tractor to till the land, then I've got a farm worker for the labor, and I am the entrepreneur. I can combine that, right, to manufacture something, right, to create something on the farm. I can either put wheat on the farm, I can put cabbages on the farm, and etc. But I cannot put everything on the farm, which means that the resources that I have, I can only produce a specific something with them. Now, when I produce that specific something, I have to forego something else. I could have used the farm for cabbages instead of wheat. I could have even chosen not to do farming. I would have put a mine on the farm, right? And what? And found some gold or some iron ore on the what? On the farm. So I have to make a choice. When I make that choice, I forego something. So opportunity cost is then the next best alternative that has been foregone when we make a choice in economics because of scarcity. We're saying that I wanted a lot of different things. Resources are limited. I have to make a choice. In making a choice, I forego something that could have been good for me. So that which I forego, we call it the opportunity cost of production. So those are some of the key concepts. That's a very typical exam question. Those are some of the key concepts of what? Of economics, right? Now, these terms over here, they're not that important, but let's just browse over them, just in case maybe the lecturer gets excited and gives you a question that is in line with what? With these specific issues. So what is an economic good? Right. An economic good, we're basically saying that any good or service in a country that you have to pay to obtain, it's an economic good, which means that if you don't have to pay for it, then it's not an economic good. We actually have what we call public goods, where you don't pay and etc. So those are not economic goods. So economic goods, any good that you have to what? That you have to pay for them. Then a free good is a good where you don't have to pay for it. The reason why you don't have to pay for it is because it's abundant. For example, the air that we breathe, it's abundant. Therefore, it's a what? It's a free good that we are consuming as a country. Then you can also talk about consumer goods versus capital goods. Consumer goods are goods that you consume, current consumption. For example, your bread, right? For example, your tinned beef, right? Those are consumer goods, right? Then capital goods are goods that you don't consume at the moment. For example, if you buy a tractor, right, you're going to use it in what? In production. Therefore, it's a capital good. So if you maybe you might ask me, what is a television? A television is a consumer good. Why? Because you're going to consume it. You might not finish it, so it is a durable good, right? But it is still a consumer good because you're going to consume it there and then. But a capital good, you're going to use it for the production of other goods. Right. So I think we are done with those specific terms and conditions. Okay. Fine. So I've given you a couple of terms. I've given you a bit of an introduction into what economics is all about. So you now know what economics is all about, right? That's good. The next stage now in economics is we now want to talk about the theories of economics. Now there are various theories of economics that you're going to talk about in your study module. We are going to talk about the theory of what? Of the PPC, or the theory of the production possibility curve. Then after that, we are going to talk about the theory of demand, then the theory of supply, then the theory of the consumer, that is consumer behavior. But for you guys, I don't think you do consumer behavior, so that one will be out. You're going to talk about the theory of production, the production costs, the theory of the market structures and market systems, the theory of labor. So there are various theories in economics that you need to understand for you to be able to get an understanding of what? Of microeconomics. So this is the part where you're talking about the positive part of economics. We're talking about relevant scientific facts that have been proven in what? In economics. So for us to study economics, we are going to make a lot of assumptions. An assumption is basically, we are saying that this does not exist in the real world. But for us to understand economics, let's assume something. Let's assume this is real. Right? So we are going to make a lot of assumptions. We are also going to put a lot of graphs. Then in addition to the graphs, we might have some calculations here and there. So bear with me on this part, right? So we want to assume what we call a closed economy. What do I mean by a closed economy? I mean that we are assuming that South Africa does not practice international trade. It is the only country in existence. There is no other country that is importing or exporting from South Africa. So that's a closed economy. Then we also want to assume that South Africa only produces two things in the country. They either produce wheat or they produce machines. So those are the two goods that South Africa produces. Either they are producing wheat or they're producing machines, right? So once we have made that assumption, right, we then start asking ourselves questions now, economic questions. For example, how much wheat or machines would be produced if we use all the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills in South Africa, right? And how can we represent this in a graphical sense, right? So this gives you now to what we call the production possibility curve. So this is your first graph in economics, right? So don't be scared. It's very simple and very straightforward. We'll talk about it. Right. So you can see here on our graph, sorry if it's not really clear, trying to make sure that it's big enough. On this side over here, we have our machines. Then on this side over here, we have our wheat. Right. So remember, we said we are producing what? Machines and wheat. So we are saying that if South Africa was to produce only machines, just machines only, right? Using all the land, capital, whatnot, they are going to produce 15, let's say this are millions, they're going to produce 15 million machines, which is point number A over here, right? If they produce what? All, only machines, right? But again, we're also saying, what if South Africa produces only wheat, no machines, just wheat only? How much wheat will they produce? We are saying that they will produce 5,000 tons of wheat over here, which is your point F over here. So point A represents all machines, point F represents all wheat. So those are our two extremes. But we also know that although those are our two extremes, as a reasonable country, we just don't want wheat, we also want machines. We just don't want machines, we also want wheat. So there can be a combination, right? For example, if we look at point number E over here, right? We are saying that South Africa has decided to produce 6 million machines, and they are going to produce what? 4,000 tons of what? Of wheat, right? So that's what they're producing. But again, point number E, we are saying that they are using all of their resources. So the production possibility curve, or the PPC line, is the line that shows us the output that is going to be produced in an economy when all the factors of production are being utilized. So everything that is on this line, right, which is A, B, O, D, E, F, everything that is on this line represents when we are using all our factors of production, right? Let's look at it from a different perspective. So what does point P over here represent? Point P, we call it an inefficient point. We call it an underemployment of resources point. Why? We are saying that if you are producing at point P, you are not using all of your resources, which means there are some resources that are not being utilized by the country. How do we prove that? Now, remember, under scarcity, we said that we have to make a choice, and that choice is an opportunity cost, right? That's what we say. We said that if you want to buy a house in Durban, because you have limited resources, you cannot also have the house in Cape Town. You can only have one of the two. So it's the same concept, really. So when we're producing, using all of our factors of production, at point A, we had 15 what? We had 15,000, 15 million, right? Machines, and 0 wheat. That's what we said about point A. But if we said, no, we want a little bit of wheat, and we go to point B, do you see what happens at point B? We now get 1,000 wheat, but we have lost in terms of what? In terms of our machines. We no longer have 15 million. We now have, maybe this is what, 14. We now have 14 million. What? In terms of our what? In terms of our machines. And as we go down the production possibility curve, like we go to point E, we see that the machines continue to go down while the wheat is increasing. So that is representing what? Opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost of producing at point A is the what? The opportunity cost of producing at point B over here, right, is the 1 million that we lost over here. The opportunity cost of producing at point E over here is the differences, all this that we've lost of the machines that would have what? That would have consumed. So the changes along the PPC represent opportunity cost, represent movement, represent the choices that we are making as individuals. But let's go back to my point where I was talking about point what? Point P. So if you look at point P, we have 6 million right, machines, and we have got 3,000 in terms of what? In terms of our width over here. But we can move to point E, right? Where we now have 4,000 watt width. We have added 1,000 in what? In width. But have we lost in terms of the machine? No. We are still having 6 million machines. So there was no opportunity cost, which means that if there was no opportunity cost, it means that the resources, that we had were being underutilized. That is the reason why there was no opportunity cost. So point number P is inefficient. Why? Because there is no opportunity cost if we change. So it is an inefficient or underemployment of resources that we have. So that's point number 2. So you can see I'm already, those concepts that we introduced in our definition, we're already talking about them using the theory of the PPC. We talked about choice. We said choosing from A, B, C, D, E, F, you're making a choice. We said that when you move from A to B, there's an opportunity cost. We say that A, B, D, E, F represents the maximum, right? It represents the what? The maximum using all of the resources, which means that a point like over here is unattainable. Why? Because of scarcity. We are saying that you don't have the resources to produce a point. Let's say this is point X over here. You don't have the resources to produce a point X. Why? Because of scarcity. You don't have the resources to produce a point C over here. Why? Because of what? Of scarcity of the what? Of the resources that exist in the economy. But we said point number P, we said that's underemployment of resources, right? So why do I have a dotted line? Why is this dotted line? What is this dotted line over here? The dotted line that is over here, we are saying that in a situation, in a country, for example, labor, we said labor is a resource, right? Labor is a resource. But we know that children are being born every year. The population of South Africa is growing, which means that this year we can have 50 million South Africans, but in 10 years' time, we can have 60 million South Africans, which means that we have increased the resource. So over time, certain resources can increase. So that is the dotted line. So we're saying that as the resources increase, we experience economic growth. As land increases, as we get more and more resources, we are getting more and more economic growth. For example, capital can also increase. Capital technology, if technology improves, we get better machines that produce better things. So that's another way of what? Of seeing the PPC growing. So it is likely the PPC can, over time, it can shift to the dotted line. And therefore, the point C, which was not attainable before, is now attainable after an increase in the resources of a country. So that's the what? That's the production possibility curve for you. Okay. So I think those are the various concepts. And so just to summarize, when you're talking about the production possibility curve, we said number 1, if you are producing on the production possibility curve line, you are what? Fully utilizing all the resources. We said number 2, if you are producing within the line, you are what? You are underutilizing your resources. Number 3, we said that any points after the line or outside the line, they are scarce resources. You cannot get there. You cannot produce that. Then we said that if you are shifting along the PPC, we said you're making choices and you're experiencing opportunity cost. So that's a summary of what we've talked about now. So there are other concepts that we can talk about deeper, which I usually like to do when we're doing questions. Concepts like usually do with the shape, for example. Why is the PPC a bell shape? Why does it have like a nice bell shape? The concept of increasing opportunity costs over time. There are some complex concepts, but you will see them when we do practice questions, because that's one of the ways that we tutor you by doing practice questions, where we talk much more deeper into some of the various concepts that we want to discuss. Okay. I think I've already talked about this one, where we said that you've got an old PPC over here. We were saying that using the resources that you have, right? So you can see in this diagram over, this nice diagram over here, right? You can even point it out. You can see you've got your land, and then you've got your capital over there. Maybe there's a little person over there, which is your what? Which is your labor, and maybe the person who owns the farm, we can call them the what? The entrepreneur, right? So those are the resources that you have. But over time, as technology increases, right? As labor, as population grows, you can see that the old PPC, which is red in color, can change to the new PPC, which is what? Which is blue in color. Why? Because there is growth in resources, which is population growth, which is discovery of new resources that you didn't know before, or getting new land from maybe you went into a war as a country and defeated the other people and you get land. So that's another way of growing your resources. Or improvement of technology. As your technology improves, your capital also improves, and your PPC shifts to the right. So a shift of the PPC to the right represents economic growth. Why? Because of growth of resources and improvement in technology. But a PPC can actually shift to the left, can actually come inside over here. It's very possible to have a PPC shrinking downwards like that. Now, why would the PPC shrink downwards? Let me give you a very good example, right? Emigration. If people in South Africa start leaving the country and go to Europe and go to America and start working in America and in Europe, if we have more South Africans leaving the country than foreigners coming into the country, what's going to happen to the labor? It's going to shrink, which means that last year we might have 20 million people in the labor force, but this year we might have 19 million people in the labor force. Why? Because South Africans have left the country and decided to go and work elsewhere. So because of that, the PPC can actually what? Can actually shrink. Or the example that I gave you of a war. Let's say, for example, you get into a war with Botswana, and then Botswana wins the war, and they now say that Limpopo is now part of Botswana. So definitely you have lost that land. So of course your PPC is going to what? Is going to shrink. So those are some of the funny things that can happen when you see a PPC is going to what? It's going to shrink downwards. Okay. So those are some of the concepts that you might need to know. Okay, let's see. Okay, do we need to talk about this? All right, it's fine. Let's talk about it. Okay, so I've shown you the concepts whereby the whole PPC, you can see in this diagram, is the whole PPC shift. But sometimes it might not shift the whole PPC. It might shift one side only. You can see the PPC was the first one was the blue one, and then the red one, you can see that there's a shift like this. It's swiveled like this. So what can result in a funny shift like this? So instead of having a whole shift, there is a swivel. So if there is an increase in technology in one specific industry, so for example, we're talking about wheat and machines. So if there is an increase in the technology for wheat only, then it will shift only on one side. So in this example over here, you can see that it is only cell phones that increased. Why? Because the technology for cell phones is the one that increased only in that specific country. So it is very possible to see a PPC shift that is like that, where it's only moving on one side. Why? Because of changes in the production techniques or production technologies of one specific product in a country that results in a shift or a swivel of the what? Of the PPC. Okay, that's done. Yeah, finally. I think we were almost finished with our topic. So now that I've introduced you to all these concepts now, we want to get into unit number 2, right? We want to get into more detail about economics. But there is something that is fundamental to economics that you need to understand, right? There is what we call the economic problem. The reason why we study economics. I've given you the definition, I've given you the theories, I've given you all these different things, but why do we study economics, right? The reason why we study economics is to answer the basic economic problem, right? To answer the basic economic problem. And what is the basic economic problem? It is how do we allocate limited or scarce resources, right, among unlimited or competing ones. That's the basic economic problem. It is usually split into 3 things, which are called the 3 economic questions. The first question is what to produce. The second question is how to produce. The third question is for whom to produce. What do I mean? When we say what to produce as an economic question, we are asking ourselves, right, that there are many things that we can produce. We can produce cars, we can produce lorries, we can produce trucks, we can produce cell phones, we can produce sofas, we can produce clothes. So what are we going to produce as a country, right? So that's the basic economic question. What are we going to produce as a country? Do we produce goods or do we produce services? Do we produce economic goods or do we produce free goods? Do we produce public goods? Do we produce capital goods or consumer goods? Non-durable goods or durable goods? What are we going to produce as a country? So that's the first question. Then the second question is, how do we produce? Once we have decided that, no, we want to produce cars or we want to produce clothes, how do we produce the clothes? Now, remember, we said that there are 4 resources. How do we mix up the resources? How much land, how much capital, how much labor are we going to use in the production of one car, in the production of one vehicle? Because we can have different combinations. Let me give you an example. In a farm, you can have land, labor, 5 people, and 1 tractor. That's a combination, right? And you can produce 10,000 tons of wheat. But the same farm, you can have land, you can have 100 people and no tractor. They'll be using hoes, manually farming the land. And you can still produce 10,000 tons of wheat. So there are different combinations of goods that you can use, product factors of production that you can use in a country. So how do you combine the 4 factors of production, which are the 4 resources that we talked about? How do you combine the land? How do you combine the capital? How do you combine the entrepreneurial skills for you to be able to produce? How do you produce? So what to produce, how to produce, and then lastly, for whom to produce? All right, we have decided we want to produce cars. We've decided how we are going to produce cars, but now we have got 10 cars over here. Who is going to get the cars? Are we going to say, please line up, here's your car, here's your car? How do we distribute those cars? Do we have an auction? Do we put prices on the cars? Or do we ration and say anyone who was born in 1998 are the only people that are getting cars over here? How do we distribute those cars? So that's another question that we need to answer, right? In economics. So to answer these 3 questions, then you get into the various topics that we are going to study. For example, demand and supply, you're answering for whom to produce. For example, if you look at, I think it's unit number 4 or unit number 5, cost of production, you're answering how to produce, right? So all of the various topics that you're going to study, you're just answering those 3 economic questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, for whom to produce or for whom to distribute. Now, one of the ways to answer this question is by looking at the market systems that you're going to use in a country. So there are various ways of looking at it, right? There are countries that decided for us to answer the basic economic problem, we are going to use what we call a command economy. Some countries said we are going to use a market economy. Some countries said we are going to use a mixed economy. Now, you don't really need to know much about these specific topics for your level, but you just need to understand what it means. When we say a command economy, an example, there's no example right now that is very, very good, but North Korea is an example of a command economy. Russia and China used to be examples of a command economy, or even Cuba. Cuba is another example of a command economy. A command economy, the political people will sit once a year, and then they will decide that in the next year, we are going to produce 5,000 cars, we're going to produce 10,000 bushels of wheat, we're going to produce 5 tons of clothes. So they are answering the what to produce question. And after they have done that, they're going to say that this is how we are going to produce it. They're going to sit down again and say, for us to produce the 10,000 cars, we're going to employ 50 people in a factory in Zhejiang province, and they're going to use these machines. So they answer how to produce. And then they're going to ration the things that they've produced. So for anyone born in this specific year, they're going to get a car in this specific year, etc. So that's a command economy. But it's very rare for you to actually see a command economy action. What is more common is what you call a mixed economy, but I'll talk about it. Then on the other hand, you have what we call a market economy. Now, what is a market economy? A market economy is like the one that you see in the USA. A market economy, they're saying that no one ever sits down to decide for you what you're going to produce, but it is the market that decides. So if there is an increase in demand for cell phones, if people start buying cell phones like crazy, then companies will start investing money in producing cell phones. So there's what we call the invisible hand of the market that is helping the market decide what to produce and how to produce it. So if a company sees that it's expensive and they're making losses in their production process, they're going to change it so that they don't make losses. Why? Because they're in a market economy. If they don't change it, they're going to close down and they're going to get out of business. So they have to change it. So if you operate in a system where companies are allowed to close down because of failure, where companies make the decisions of what to produce based on what the consumers want, right? And where the goods and services are distributed based on first come, first serve in terms of the prices, then that is a market economy where there is no government intervention. But most economies in the world, they operate under the concept of what we call the mixed economy. We are taking the market economy principles and we are combining it with some government intervention, like South Africa, where we're saying that there is a market, yes, but the government here and there, they will tell you, you cannot pay your employees that much. Let's put a minimum wage. This is the minimum amount of money that you can pay your employees. So that's intervention that they're doing in the economy. So that's a mixed economy. So those three types of economies can help you answer the basic economic problem that you are having as a country. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the information that you have for unit number 1 and unit number 2. Now, usually what I would do if as we do as lectures, once we have done a lecture like we are finished with unit number 1 and unit number 2, we would then go and take a past exam paper and attempt all the questions that relate to unit number 1 and to unit number 2. Right? We can do some practice questions so that you can become more acclimated or more prepared for the exam that you're going to do. Okay, so give me a second. I just want to show you the typical examples. Workbook. I just want to show you something so that you just have an idea of what you would pay for if you pay for the lectures. So that was the lecture. Okay, there we go. So this is an example of some of the questions that you would see in an exam situation or in your assignments, right? Okay. So question number 1, right? If the principal concern of economics is the question of how best to use society's resources, then economics would be irrelevant if. So it's going back, remember we defined economics. So it's telling you that economics is the question of how best to use society's resources. So when would economics be irrelevant, right? So first question says we have unlimited ones. So if we have unlimited ones and limited resources, do we need economics? From our definition, yes, that is the definition of economics. So A is wrong. Let's go to B. Economies were organized around command rather than market principles. That doesn't even make sense. That does not answer the question that we want to. So we ignore that one. C, economies were organized around market rather than command principles. Again, that doesn't answer the question. We let it go. Then D, resources were available in unlimited quantities. That is our answer right there. So we are saying that if economics is the study of society's resources, we only do it because we have unlimited ones. But it could be irrelevant if, answer D, if resources are available in unlimited quantity. We're saying that if there was too much land and too much labor, we would not study economics. So our answer would be D for this particular situation. So let's try number 2. I think we still have 10 minutes. So let's try number 2. The problem of economizing is essentially one of deciding how to make the best of what. So what is the economic problem? What is the economic definition? Again, it's about the definition of economics. A says you have virtually unlimited resources to satisfy limited ones. Is that the definition of economics? No, that's not the definition. That's opposite of the definition of economics. B, virtually unlimited resources. Again, the moment we say unlimited resources in economics, that just doesn't sit right, because economics is about limited resources and unlimited ones. So that's not okay. Then C, limited resources. That looks good, to satisfy virtually unlimited ones. So that's our answer right there. C, limited resources and virtually unlimited ones. Let's go to number 3. A basis for the systematic study of economics exists because A, resources are scarce in relation to material wants. That makes sense. I think that's our answer. Let's just check the other ones out, but that should be our answer. Governments interfere in the, no. Individual economic actors cannot be, no. Resources are plentiful, again, no. The market constantly fails to allocate resources efficiently. It's sort of correct, but it's not the correct answer. So the correct answer is A. Resources are scarce in relation to what? To unlimited ones. So that's our answer, A, over there. Then let's attempt question number 4. Question number 4, opportunity cost is best defined as, remember, I've already given you the definition of opportunity cost. We said that we make choices, and when we make these choices, we forgo something. So whatever we forgo is going to be our opportunity cost. But there's a caveat in that definition. Let's look at the answers. A, the out-of-pocket money costs incurred when a decision is made. No. Opportunity cost is not about money, right? It's not about money, it's about choices, right? B, the value of the best alternative sacrificed when a choice is made. That's the definition of economics, the value of the best alternative sacrificed when a choice is made. Now, you might make a mistake and think it's the value of all the alternatives sacrificed, which is C, which is incorrect. That's why I said there's a caveat in that answer. It's not the value of all the alternatives, no, but it's the value of the best next alternative forgone when you make a choice. So that's opportunity cost over there. Okay, so that's question number 4. Then question number 5, microeconomics is a branch of economics that studies, remember, we said that there is macro and then there is microeconomics, right? Macro versus microeconomics. So what is microeconomics? Says there a determination of national income? No, that is macro, because national income, broad, right? B, the behavior of individual decision-making units in an economy. That's the exact definition that we talked about. The behavior of individual people, of individual people in the economy making decisions. That is what microeconomics is all about. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that I can end it here for now. But that is basically how we do our studies in microeconomics. We go through the lecture, then after the lecture, we go through the questions. For today, I was doing it alone because I'm just doing a presentation to you guys. But if you are joining our classes, you are free to also come through and also attempt the questions with me so that I can also gauge whether you guys are understanding the concepts that I am teaching, or I need to repeat some of the concepts. So it will be very interactive in nature. For today, I was just making making a presentation. So thank you all for joining in today. Then, as I highlighted, if you want to continue doing lectures in us, we're going to start some lectures in September for microeconomics. The lectures are 650 Rand for the entire semester, right? Where we go through all the notes that the lecturer has given you and I explain them. Then we also assist you in terms of giving you guidance with your examination, the assignments that you have. And also in addition to that, we are also giving you guidance in terms of your examination, preparing you for the what? For the exam that you're what? That you're going to do at the end of the what? At the end of the semester. Are there any questions that you might have for me before I close the lecture? You are free to unmute yourself or maybe text in the chat if you've got any questions that you have for me today. Any questions? Okay, I assume no questions, so I trust you're all happy. I will post the link in the group. There is 650 for this module for economics 1A only. 650 for this module specifically, per each module to the person that asked. Any other questions before I close the lecture? So someone is asking over 350. 650 for the module. And you can pay in 2 installments. You can pay 50% and then pay the balance later. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys up to the end of the month, up until 31 August to make the payments for those that are interested. Then in September, we will start the classes for economics. Thank you guys for joining in. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.